October 7 was a moment of crisis for the entire Jewish people, that kind of like it woke them up in a way. And some of them actually didn't go through the entire process, but like we saw after October 7, like there were people that said, like, we no longer want to come to shul, but then there were also people who were not like halakhically Jewish, and they said, now I have to come. Like, and for some of them it was a phase, for others really not. And it just like, it fueled something that was inside them all along, but they had felt like they had time, right? They had time to wonder about this. And then they were like, no, actually, like, Jews still get killed for what they are, right? And it felt that was the time that they had to ask themselves that question.
Welcome to this episode of Your People Will Be My People, Conversion in a Post-October 7th World. This podcast is sponsored by Project Ruth. Founded in 2023, Project Ruth formalizes Orthodox affiliation for Jews of diverse and varied backgrounds, welcoming those seeking Orthodox conversion to find meaningful connection to and understanding of Jewish life and practice. My name is Rabbi Adam Mintz. I'm the founder and president of Project Ruth. I'm here with my podcast partner, Meredith Berkman, community activist, leader within the Jewish community, and founder of Zionista. Today, we are joined by Rabbi Myriam Ackerman from Paris. And we have focused up to now on conversions in North America. Welcome, Myriam, and we love to hear your story. And then we would love to hear a little bit about the challenges of what Orthodox conversion looks like in Paris, in France, and maybe around the world.
Hello, thank you so much for the invitation. I apologize for the completely fake British accent that I will keep using throughout the podcast. So I am French. My name is Myriam Rabbi Sommer. I am the co-head of a synagogue that's modern Orthodox, kind of leaning towards partnership in Paris. I met Rabbi Mintz, had the utmost honor of meeting Rabbi Mintz. I think it was 2018, probably. And that was through Yeshivat Maharat. Yeshivat Maharat is, of course, the first institution to ordain Orthodox women as rabbis. And I had the honor of receiving smicha from Maharat, and that was 3 years ago in 2023. Rabbi Mintz was my Gemara teacher, and he is an amazing Gemara teacher. So that's basically how we met and how I had the pleasure of studying with Rabbi Mintz for 3 years and more, because there are alumni classes as well.
Well, I have one immediate question, because in the lead up to this, you mentioned that you have two very young children, and I just did the math on when you graduated. And so you got smicha when you had...
While pregnant. I had an 18-month-old at home with grandma. That was our first time ever leaving her to get smicha, because my husband and I, we got smicha at the exact same time. I think we made jokes about this because he was a rabbi for like 1 week and I wasn't. So he was like, you need to call me rabbi, because he had smicha from YCT and I was still waiting for Maharat smicha. So that's how...
I just want to acknowledge, as a Jewish woman, mother of 4 with no smicha, that the fact that you were in rabbinic school, in Yeshivat Maharat, and that you became a rabbi, not only while the mother of a toddler, but while pregnant with your second. That is a very, very impressive. It almost feels biblical to me, but we can move on from that. But I had to acknowledge it. I know that, Adam and I have done many of these podcasts, interviewing people who have converted, interviewing people who are married to people who converted to Judaism, to see what that was like. And I think this idea came about. I was in a conversation, for me anyway, my interest in this topic is I was in a conversation with a woman who had converted to Judaism, actually from Islam, an Iranian woman who actually has lived for some time with raising her family in Panama, where she told me that in Panama, her family, she's not accepted because there is no conversion in Panama. So then I started talking to Adam about that. So I think the idea, especially in a place like France and in Paris, where we hear so much about Jews leaving because they don't perhaps feel secure
Right.
because of so much anti-Semitism, I'm fascinated to hear what it is like. Who is coming to you for conversion? And is it, is there been a drop off? And
Right.
how does the anti-Semitism in Paris, in Europe writ large, around the world, factor into the conversions that you do?
Yes, of course. Paradoxically, I feel like, well, people who were like born Jewish in France, but had kind of like a complicated relationship to their Judaism, I kind of sometimes dropped out after October 7. They were like, I can no longer come to shul because I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid that I will be attacked on my way to shul. I cannot wear a kippah outside. I have removed my mezuzah. But the other way around, like I feel like people who had some kind of like Jewish ancestry but were not considered halakhically Jewish by the like Orthodox establishment also came back at this time of crisis and said, I can no longer ignore that I want to be with the Jewish people. I want to experience that moment with the Jewish people. And I no longer want to be in that liminal space of like, oh, I have a Jewish dad, or I had Jewish grandparents, or like those people started to identify more strongly with the destiny of the Jewish people after October 7th. So that I feel that was like very unexpected. And we felt that people should flee at this moment. And in fact, many of them did the exact opposite, right? Of that they had to turn to these roots, to sometimes they didn't even have like ancestry or like family that was Jewish, but they felt like the Jewish people is getting harassed all the time, and like we feel like we cannot let this go on. Like we want to be a part of that people for some reason, right? Because it's strange. Like we imagine, I suppose, like in our fantasies of like, why would people convert? We always have that representation that's also in the Talmud, right? Of people would convert at times when the Jewish people is very powerful, right? And I think we've experienced the exact opposite of that, right? Of people having no external motivation whatsoever and feeling that they wanted to be a part of that people at the time it was the hardest.
So, and Adam, the name of the podcast is Conversion in a Post-October 7th World. So Adam, you too, you've seen more people coming forward, but I want to ask the two rabbis here, what is that? Why? Is it because of what is there something in the texts that you have studied separately together that I have not read that would explain that? Or is it even counterintuitive if one looks at Jewish history as expressed in all of the things that you have studied as rabbis?
Wow, that's really interesting. I feel like some of them had like very personal trajectories of like wanting to reconnect, and that perhaps October 7 just put these things that they had been perhaps like not procrastinating, but like they had been delaying the moment of like asking themselves the question of like, what does this Jewish part of my identity, what does it mean for me? And it felt like what was experienced as a pogrom, in the sense that October 7 was a moment of crisis for the entire Jewish people, that kind of like it woke them up in a way. And I would have to say, like, people came and said, some of them actually didn't go through the entire process, but like we saw after October 7, like there were people that said, like, we no longer want to come to shul, but then there were also people who were not like halachically Jewish, and they said, now I have to come. Like, and for some of them it was a phase, for others really not. And it just like, it fueled something that was inside them all along, but they had felt like they had time, right? They had time to wonder about this. And then they were like, no, actually, like, Jews still get killed for what they are, right? And it felt that was the time that they had to ask themselves that question.
The floor is Myriam's. I will just say that I found the same thing. I'll just say that the people who came to us post-October 7th, they're not people who never thought about their Judaism. It could be the people who never thought about Judaism, kind of stayed away from Judaism post-October 7th. These are people, like Myriam described, people who had some flame inside of them that was kind of, right, Miriam, sometimes on, sometimes extinguished, and somehow October 7th lit that flame. I'll also just describe a very specific type of person. You know, we all know that there are Israelis who leave Israel, whether they move to France or they move to the United States. And what they want to do is they want to become as un-Israeli as possible. So these nice Jewish men, Israeli men who finish the army, move to France and look for the prettiest French woman who is not Jewish, or the prettiest blonde American woman who is not Jewish. And they want to be not Jewish. And then came October 7th. And all of a sudden, these men are called back to the army to defend Israel. And some of them went and some of them didn't go.
And
but
some people didn't have to go, but went anyway.
Right. And some people volunteered to go. But everybody had to deal with their Israeliness, their Jewishness. And all of a sudden, these men who wanted to run as far as they could from Israel and Judaism, they were forced to address their Judaism. And I have an amazing story about some woman who are on October 7th. It was a Shabbos, as you remember. It was Shmini Atzeret, right? So on that day, she actually walked into a restaurant in Brooklyn and saw some guy who was depressed in the corner. And she thought like that was kind of that was a good intro line. So she went over to him and she says, "Why do you look so depressed?" Anyway, now they're married and they have a baby. And you know, that was it. She had no connection. She had nothing to do with Judaism. And she met this Israeli guy who was deciding whether or not to go back to the army. So it's just amazing the way October 7th, you know, unfortunately, but in a sense, you know, the way that it rekindled Judaism for these people.
Did he go to the army?
What? So he did not go to the army, but he's very connected to his Judaism, and he's connected to his family, which wasn't so, and his kids they're going to move back to Israel eventually. So it's an amazing story.
Is there something, so you had the same experience in two different places, you two rabbis, in terms of, and it's fascinating, like a bintul yid, right? The nir tamid, the flame that never went out. So that's interesting. But what is there, specific perhaps to Paris or just to France that might have been different in the people that I am interested in what is conversion like, for example, in your community, the community that you and your husband have been building. What is that like? And, is it different? And if you had the same experience, what would be uniquely French or European or Parisian? And that would be really interesting, I think, for us to understand.
Right. So what would be uniquely French, first of all, is that it's the third biggest Jewish community in the world. But at the same time, when we think of like Israel and the United States, those are like towering giants. And we feel like a smaller community could be around. It's hard to really assess because it's forbidden in France because of the tradition of laïcité, which could translate as like the secular system, but understood in a specifically French way that actually you can't count Jews, like you can't count people by religion, right? So it's based on people who like clearly identify as Jewish, or like people who at some point attended a synagogue, and that would be behind 300,000 people and 500,000 people. So that's a much smaller Jewish community. It's a much smaller Jewish population. I feel like France gets misrepresented abroad in the sense that it feels like everybody's leaving. That's not true, right? A lot of people are making Aliyah, and when they are making Aliyah, because they're French, they're very vocal about it, right? When they move to Netanya, that's where they all are at the moment. They move to Netanya, and then they're like, France was horrible. That is, while there is the experience of anti-Semitism that it's impossible to deny, like it's happened to most of us, and actually, interestingly enough, it has intensified, not directly after October 7th, but I would say this summer, I'm sorry, but for many Jews, that was hell. Like, really, like, people kept calling me, texting me, should we leave now? We keep getting questions about, like, so you guys, when will you stop committing genocide? Can you stop Bibi? Why do you have an apartheid state? Why did you colonize Palestine? And people who just look Jewish, like even wearing like, I was wearing a turban like that, and I didn't speak Hebrew or anything, but like people identified that it was like kisui maleh, and then they, at some point, like a crazy person started asking me like, kill BB, like death to BB, stuff like that. And it was like, people who look Jewish get that stuff a lot. On the other hand, there's a rich Jewish community that, for instance, in Paris, I think it's like outside of New York, it has to be a record-breaking number of Jewish restaurants. I think Rabbi Mintz has had a taste of that sort of like dynamic.
Meredith, I hope you're a big fan of Parisian Jewish restaurants, because they're a big treat.
Well, I haven't been to Paris in years. I've often thought,
you got to go to Paris.
For the Jews.
You can't be Jewish if you don't go to Paris.
100% for the Jews. And like a lot of Jews are interested in like getting kosher food. We have like, I don't know, it's like 300 Consistoire synagogues. And like, we'll come back to the Consistoire because it's like the central authority that Jews have to turn to, for instance, when they need to convert. So that's exactly why we need to discuss this together. But they have hundreds of synagogues. There are literally like more than 150 kosher restaurants just in Paris. And I don't think, having talked with
I had no idea.
Really good. Yeah, because it's like cuisine. It's like we love our food, right? It's a Parisian thing, but many Jews like are actively looking for kosher restaurants. So they're more observant, right, than other important Jewish communities in other European capitals, right? So from having talked to like, my friends in Switzerland and Germany, and like even like I've had Sophia from Helsinki, right, who's also from Maharat. There is no equivalent of that. Like perhaps London would be the closest equivalent, and I think it's not even close, right? That having that dynamic of a Jewish life. So what's specific to French Judaism? 70% of the population approximately is Sephardic, right? So they came from Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. That is also my case. I came from, my mother moved from Tunisia to France. They are extremely Zionist. Like, it's sometimes to a point that they will never question anything that the Israeli government does. Like, there's a point to which, like, it feels like they will never oppose anything that Israel does, as in like we need to have a shared front, right? As in we're all in this together. And many of them support like even like right-wing policies of Yishuv in Yehuda v'Shomron, right? So they're like pretty right-wing in terms of Israeli politics, and pretty right-wing in terms of French politics as well. And that's also due to the fact that the left has deserted the Jews. Like it's so crazy. I used to vote. I used to be a left-wing young enthusiastic woman, and like they just turned so pro-Palestinian that they just completely stopped caring about Jews in France, right? Never clearly denouncing anti-Semitism, or sometimes like really fueling it directly by playing. So if I can give you an example, the leader of the left-wing party had a wicked joke last week about, it was something around, it's called the Epstein files, and so he was probably, you should call him Epstein because he was Jewish. And it was like crazy.
Well, I mean, look what happened in Germany last week. In Poland, where a right-wing, I think he was a right-wing politician, but he held up an Israeli flag, and in place of the Magen David in the Senate, there was a swastika.
Okay, so we've experienced similar things with like representatives of the main left-wing party holding Palestinian flags in. I mean, where they would traditionally hold like a French flag, they had a Palestinian flag instead, right? Or some of them would like wave the Palestinian flag in front of like the mayor's office, right? And we felt that it was completely one-sided. And in that sense, I think it has brought Jews who were like more moderate, centered left, like they went more to the right. And that's like sociologically something that's interesting to notice. In the same way that Jews who would systematically vote Democrat in the US have been considering Trump as a pro-Israel ally in many contexts, right? So
he won the Israel Prize today.
Right?
Trump won the Israel Prize today. But there is, it may perhaps not as extreme as you're describing, but there is a lot of talk, and it is true that the Democratic Party, that a lot of people who would have self-identified as progressive, liberal, center-left Democrats in this country now feel that there's no home for them if they are also Zionist in those political circles. But what you are describing is much more, let's call it radical, but with a small r, that, which is very, very interesting. So how, so that impacts you personally, but also the people that you're seeing who are coming to you, joining your community, you're seeing that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we've experienced of like, it hasn't changed how pro-Israel people were. Like, it has actually strengthened, right, their resolve in like supporting Israel. But I believe that in a way that it has made a lot of Jews in the community feel like they're no longer aligned with like, I remember I was talking about this I went on TV a few days ago to discuss like how the new anti-Semitism is just anti-Zionism, which of course I was the only one like having that take because it's controversial. And I was discussing the fact that a few years ago in France, I believe that there was some kind of consensus around, okay, everybody believes in the concept of the two-state system. So what this means, like the Jewish institutions would say, we want a two-state solution. And then the pro-Palestinians would say, we want a two-state solution. And we felt like we were discussing the same things, basically, right? We didn't know exactly how we would achieve that, or we wouldn't define the exact borders of the second state, right? But at the same time, it felt like there was a common ground. Now, people are calling for the eradication of the state of Israel. So there's the representative of Israel in France, Caroline Yadon, who's tried to promote a law that would state you cannot publicly call for the eradication of the state of Israel, right? For the dismantling of the state of Israel, which would criminalize slogans such as from the river to the sea, right? And so I stated publicly that I was in favor of this law, which was also very controversial because it implies some level of censorship in terms of like freedom of expression. But at the same time, I felt like that slogan is now being used to bully Jews in universities, right? I also work as an assistant lecturer in university, because being a rabbi doesn't pay really well in France. So I have students complaining, like they know that I'm Jewish, and they come to me and they say, okay, so now Jews get screamed at, and what they're told is from the river to the sea, right? And that's it, right? You're not told like, oh, you filthy Jew anymore, right? You're called, oh, you're a Zionist, you're a genocidal Zionist, right? So that's it. That's the new anti-Semitism in France. That's how I see it. And the fact that in America, it feels like there's a whole demographic that's also like very critical of Israel, that's very like kind of like Jewish voice for peace, and that there is this critical voice. And in France, not so much. Like even people who are like not really connected to the religious part of their Jewish identity will like support Israel almost by definition, right? They will define themselves as Zionists even if they never traveled to Israel. So I feel like there's this subtle component where if you criticize Israel, most people feel directly attacked. Some of them have family in Israel. So when we say, like, I don't know, like there's a slogan such as deaf to the IDF, people feel like, oh, that's my cousin, right? So it's like almost like calling for murder. And they would say, no, it's just like we're fighting for the freedom of an oppressed people. And there's a complete lack of understanding when it comes to like, we're not talking about the same thing. Like they're discussing the very existence of the state of Israel, right?
How does this play out into the conversions that you are doing or the conversions that you are aware of in France? I mean, that, people who are choosing to cast their lot with the Jewish people at this moment in time. Are you seeing, you described earlier people who are not halakhically Jewish necessarily. Are those people coming to you now for conversion? And how does what we're discussing in France, how does that play out in the conversion work?
Okay, so there's a huge level of cognitive dissonance there, because I feel like people who are converting for the sense of like having a community. And I feel like many of them have to hide that they're converting, even to their loved ones, right? So that they wouldn't say, I am becoming Jewish. Like we have someone who's been converting with us for like, she's been in the program for a year and she hasn't even told her parents, right? And that's like the level of people will ask me to justify the actions of the Israeli government. And like the people who are converting tend to be more connected to the religious part of Judaism, sometimes less to the state of Israel. Sometimes they also never traveled there, never visited, right? And it feels like sometimes they come from, like, in the workplace, if they said, I support Israel, they would be bullied as well. And so they have no support system. And I believe that the people we've converted already tend to hide, right, that they're Jewish, that they've converted, that they're converting, because they evolve in a world that's like massively pro-Palestinian in terms of like public opinion. And so it feels like that's a hot topic. Like they would minimize their Zionism or downplay it or not even mention it, because that would be hard to defend.
So, I mean, we had someone on, someone that Adam has worked with, who is a social media, like a momfluencer. And I have noticed, I follow her now. I mean, she's a different generation. She's, in your generation, not in ours. And, but she is so public about it. And I haven't followed up, but I wanted to ask her, has she lost followers because of it? I mean, she is becoming, she's choosing an Orthodox life, and she keeps,
Mhm.
and so you're saying that that would not happen in France, because I feel like it is still, that's just one case. But I don't think what you're describing, and Adam, you're the one doing the conversions, and you know much more about this than I. Do you agree that that kind of the cloak and dagger, let's say, aspect of it would not happen here yet, or hopefully never at all?
So let me first say that Myriam is the Caitlin of Paris. She is very public about her Judaism. So, I mean, and she'll either share now or she can share some other time the fact that she has gotten some negativity because of being public about her Judaism and about her Zionism. So it's interesting to compare the two, because you see that the people who are outspoken, and obviously Myriam has a lot of followers because she's outspoken, the same way that Caitlin has all those thousands of followers and views and all those kinds of things. So you see that, but at the same time, that is more an exception than a rule now. But of course, those are the important voices, because hopefully over time, when things settle down a little bit, it's those voices that are keeping alive what we would call mainstream Zionism and pro-Jewish feelings, both in America and Paris. Now, we could go on, obviously, forever talking about this topic, but I want to just go back to where we started about conversions. And I'd love, Myriam, if you could tell everybody a little bit about what we call here the establishment conversions in Paris, the Consistoire, how that developed, and what it's like running parallel to the Consistoire in terms of conversions.
Right. So the Consistoire is I wonder if it's the equivalent of the RCA, but it's like a central institution. That would be kind of like the United Synagogue in England, right? So it kind of supervises any religious act within the Jewish community in France, right? So the Consistoire is mainstream Orthodox, right? And it is directly linked to the rabbinate, meaning it is kind of like it answers to the rabbinate, and the conversions that are directly conducted by the Consistoire will be accepted by the rabbinate, and the other way around, right? So that's their main reference point, right? So it's this official institutional body that represents Orthodox Judaism in France. It was established in 1808 by Napoleon Bonaparte, as part of his effort to organize religious communities within the French state, and like kind of an attempt at both integrating and assimilating Jews at the time, right? The goal was to integrate Jewish communities into French society while structuring their religious life under a recognized authority. So basically, it oversees Orthodox Jewish life, and that includes most synagogues, rabbis. So it has the kashrut supervision, rabbinical authority, but also community administration, right?
Can I ask a question? But what you're describing seems like the OU here, right?
Yeah, I believe like in terms of like, but the difference that does OU have such a complete monopoly of like.
So I just want to explain that the Consistoire
Is by the French government. It's
right.
not independent.
The Consistoire is established by the French government. The OU and the RC, right?
Yes, but it has autonomy, meaning like, for instance, the French government isn't allowed to say, okay, you must ordain women, right? That would be like kind of like there are anti-discrimination laws within the French government, and the Consistoire is not like doesn't have to apply them.
So the Consistoire controls the Orthodox community. So that means that all the shuls and all the rabbis are under the Consistoire. So if the Consistoire doesn't like a conversion, then the convert's not going to be able to get into any of the shuls because the Consistoire controls all the shuls and all the rabbis, right, Myriam? The RCA and the OU don't have that kind of broad acceptance. They have within their own community, they have acceptance. The Consistoire is much broader than that because it's much more official. Is that fair, Myriam, or is that not right?
It is fair, but it's
Jews, or is it run by the French government? That's the part
It is run entirely by Jews. Originally, it was created by the French government, and it is the interface that will have like direct relations with like people in power. So, like for instance, if the government needs like an official ceremony at the Pantheon, for instance, they will call on the chief rabbi of France, right? And by the way, that excludes the Reform community, which is interesting because the most famous rabbi in France happens to be Reform, right? So there's like a sort of glitch in the system where she is not officially acknowledged as a direct interlocutor of the French government because the French government would directly turn to the Consistoire for any like matter of policy, right? This
Are
means
there people elected to the Consistoire? Are they appointed? Who appoints them?
it depends on like the president or the chief rabbi is elected, and there's a system of representation. Most of these communities are like very old, like historic communities, right? And I believe that in a way it's kind of it would apply to like social orthodoxy in the US as well, where it's like mostly people who identify as Orthodox but aren't necessarily like very observant. Like they might drive to shul, but they would only drive to an Orthodox shul. And another thing that's interesting is like in France, 80% of
That may be the most Jewish thing I've ever heard anyone say.
yeah. But the thing is, 80% of Jews who identify as something in France identify as Orthodox, right? So there are a lot more Jews who don't identify as Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox, but those tend to like go unnoticed because like the only way you can record people like as Jewish is if they show up in shul at some point, right? So the thing is like 80%. So it's massive. The Orthodox community, the social orthodoxy is absolutely massive. We tend to call people who go to an Orthodox shul while not being observant, we call them the traditionalists, right? In the sense that they're not necessarily like very shomer Shabbat or anything, but if they do something, it will be 100% in a Consistoire shul. So what this implies is that there are communities that exist outside of the Consistoire world. They can be Chabad, and then Chabad has some sort of like partnership or alliance with the Consistoire that's like they will send the Consistoire their converts. They said, okay, we're not gonna like interfere with the fact that you have this monopoly over conversions and we want to work with you, not against you. The thing is, we would have loved to do that even before joining Maharat and YCT, but like we're more like modern Orthodox, and the fact that I'm a rabbi disqualifies anything we would do directly. Like if we send them converts saying like, okay, let's have an agreement, like they would directly refuse.
Wait, hold on, just a moment. You're saying that if you, because you're a Mahara, if you and your husband in your community, so your community is outside the Consistoire?
Yes, exactly. We could never be within the Consistoire because the Consistoire only has male rabbis, similar to OU. OU had this official policy that if you hire a Mahara, then you're out of the OU, which I don't think they follow through all the time. But that's the theoretically that's their policy. So it was very clear.
Jew, or a newly minted French Jew whom you convert, if they are not recognized as a French Jew, but they would. But so how does that work, Adam? If a French Jew comes here or goes to Israel and has had a conversion, if someone was converted by you and goes to Israel, I mean that's a whole other podcast series. But how does that make you feel? Number one,
well,
and how does that play out?
Let's go back a step. Someone wants to convert Myriam in Paris. If they go to the Consistoire, what happens? They set up a meeting with the Consistoire.
They set up a meeting with the Consistoire. The Consistoire makes it purposefully hard to convert. That's meaning that it's much harder than with the Rabbanut in Israel, for instance, right? So that's what happens is usually the experience we've had is like it will take a few months to get your first meeting. So it's like that phase where they're trying to like the goal is that you will give up, right? So some of the people we get like who come to our doorstep, like they've spent 6 months reaching out via email to like sending emails to the rabbi, and it's like the rabbi is not responding, and it's part of the process. It's actually like some of it is completely arbitrary, but that part I believe is so systematic. I don't even think it's arbitrary. One way you can like speed run the whole quest is if you are like friends with a Consistoire rabbi, and like I've known people who got a like relatively easy conversion process, and it was because either they had a lot of money or they were really well connected or both, right? And in that case, you don't have to wait 6 months. Like it starts early on because like you have all the right connections. But if you're not connected to anybody, like everybody I've talked to, there will be a few months where like you send messages and they don't reply. And then when you insist, they will say, okay, you need to come to all our services, Shabbat services, more specifically, for a year, no classes. So that's the first year is like just going to shul. Which implies that if someone wants to come to our synagogue, they can't possibly be at two places, in two places at the same time. So they would have to leave our synagogue, which some people did. Like they want to come to our synagogue, but they said, we want to do things properly and be accepted by everybody. So what we'll do is we'll go to the Consistoire first. So sometimes these people spend like 3-4 years outside of our synagogue because they really want a Consistoire conversion, which will be accepted by everybody, right? And it gives them more options. And what happens after a year of just coming to shul? First of all, that's really hard because they never get invitations, right? So they're just showing up and nothing happens. Like there isn't a process of like, oh, we're going to be welcoming. Like that's not part of the process. And then they take classes. Ideally, they take 2 to 3 years of like just classes, and then there's an exam. Sometimes there will be like deliberately long dates between, like they will, once you've done all the classes, they will have you wait for years till you get a date for the written exam. And then once you succeed, you have 6 more months before the oral exam. So for instance, we've had people coming to us for conversion, and their main argument was, so think of women in their 30s. They're like, I want babies. Like they're in their 30s and they want to have kids. And they're like, I can't spend 5 years with like kind of like the clock ticking, wait for 5 years till the Consistoire maybe wants me to convert. And then I'll be 37, right? Where it's not as easy to have kids as like they're 32 right now.
Shocking. It's so anti-humanist. With the way you're describing it, it's shocking to me.
So it's shocking in the human, like it's shocking on a human basis. But what they want is they want their converts to be observant. Like I've talked to Consistoire rabbis about this when we were still like, Emile went for a year in the Consistoire rabbinical school and it was a catastrophe, but we had the occasion of talking with the rabbis. So they said, we want firm converts. That's it. The reason they make it so hard is that they want people to stay firm after they convert. And that's the main point. They want to minimize people who convert for love, who will not be so observant after a few years. And that's their obsession. Like they keep obsessing over a few cases of people who converted and then didn't stay very observant. And that's like, you can't control Jews who were born Jews and who are traditionalists, but they're obsessed with like making people, if they're choosing to be Jewish, then they must be super observant, right? That's like their ideal model.
Why? What is so French about that? Is there something French about that? Is there something European about that? Adam, do you have that obsession?
I mean, well, first of all, I don't have that obsession. You know that. It's more, right, Myriam, it's more European because England is the same thing. If anything, the London Bet Din, which also, I mean, that's a little more complicated because, Myriam, the London Bet Din is actually not government sponsored, but it has, because the British are so traditional, it has a very strong hold. It's much harder to break away. In America, we kind of have this idea that everybody does what they want to do. So therefore, there can be the RCA and the RCA conversion, but But if Adam Mintz wants to have conversions, more or less, Adam Mintz can do Orthodox conversions too, as can other rabbis. In Europe, it's more traditional. In France, it's the most complicated because the Consistoire is a government, so it has some government standing. So therefore, Miriam, the person goes to shul for a year. They study for 3 years. They take the written test. They take the oral test. They get converted by the Consistoire, and that conversion is accepted in France, in Israel, in America, across the board. Someone who doesn't want that, because a woman whose clock is ticking, a man who has no patience for that, whatever the reason is. So they come to you in a meal.
Yeah.
And they join your community. You're a modern Orthodox community in Paris proper, but you're not part of the Consistoire.
Yes.
And they study with you, and they are ready for conversion. And they come to 74th Street on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and they convert with Project Ruth.
By the way, this implies so we're both 29 and we don't have a based in by now, because it's just like, it's too early. And we wouldn't imagine, and originally we felt that creating a based in, if people hear about this in the Consistoire, they will feel like directly threatened. So we felt we would take a route that implies Rabbi Mintz, who already has an established based in, and we felt that eventually people would see, we had wrong assumptions about that. The Consistoire would see that Rabbi Mintz is an RCA rabbi, and RCA is like as kosher as it gets, right? I mean, so we felt like his conversions were 100% legit, and that they would be accepted as such. And of course, there is no point for them in accepting Rabbi Mintz's conversions, because then they lose on people, money, resources, and they cannot check that Rabbi Mintz is as demanding as they are with the converts. And so basically, if we said, okay, we've had this person for a year, and then we've sent that person to Rabbi Mintz, they would think it's outrageous, because the minimum with conversions would be, I don't know, if you're really well connected and wealthy, it could be 2 to 3 years, but never less than that. And for many people, it's been 5-6 years, right? Between 5 and 7 years. That's the maximum we've heard about, is 7 years.
Now so they convert with me and you, they go back to Paris.
And that is what you're doing, Miriam, right? You are sending your converts to Project Ruth.
So what I want to understand is, so if someone converts with me, it's not an RCA conversion. So some members of the RCA may not accept the convert, but basically the conversion and the convert and their children are going to Orthodox shuls and going to Orthodox schools, and more or less there is acceptance within the Orthodox community. But if somebody comes back to Paris, so the Consistoire will not marry them, correct?
Will not marry them. We've had that case where we sent a pregnant mom to Rabbi Mintz, and then she came back, had her baby boy, and then the Consistoire was like, no bris for this baby. So it's crazy.
And so then you have a moil that you call upon, and then they are what do you do?
Because they wanted specifically a Consistoire mohel, what happened was that this person just said, okay, we're going to get this baby a bris without any brachos. Where it's okay, the kid is circumcised because it's better to do it now than some other point, and now she's reconverting with the Consistoire. So whether these people have two choices. They can stay, if they want to stay in France, they can stay within the IECA system, and then our husband and I, we can make sure that they get married within IECA. We hold ceremonies for babies as well.
Is the name of your
It's the name of our organization. That's Modern Orthodox, right? So if they stay within the system, they're all good, right? And that's it. And if they want the acknowledgement of the Consistoire, and they want, for instance, they want a Consistoire bris, or they want a Consistoire bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah, if they want to get married with a Consistoire rabbi, then their paperwork gets checked, and Rabbi Mintz's name is apparently not good enough for them. I am so sad to tell you that, but now you know. You've known for a few years now. And
what happens if that person moves to Israel?
Okay, so then that's fine, right? Because basically, for instance, our weddings, we affirm that they're Emil's weddings. I tend to participate as well, but it's easier if we say those are Emil's weddings. Then they can get recorded by the Consistoire for the purpose of Aliyah, right? So this means that these people, I assume, could 100% make Aliyah. And I think that Rabbi Mintz can also explain, like, the fact he has partnerships in Israel that make sure that these people can, at the very least, make Aliyah. The question
You
of, like,
don't have to be Orthodox to go on Aliyah. Right? You just need to be part of a community and to be Jewish. So therefore, it's much easier to make Aliyah. But I would imagine if it's non-consistoire, the Rabbanut would not accept those weddings in whatever that matters. Meaning, if their children, if you have a convert who converted through you and me and they moved to Israel, their children would not be married by the Rabbanut. You see, it's too early. That's the interesting thing, Meredith. We've never proven it in the next generation. So you have someone who Myriam sends to me. She goes back to Paris. Myriam and Emil marry that woman with her husband. They move to Israel. They're allowed to make Aliyah. But when they have a child, Israel doesn't control things like Moalim and all that the same way that Paris does, that France does. So they have a bris and the kid goes to school. It's Israel. You go to school. And then 25 years from now, that kid wants to get married. So in theory, Myriam, they won't accept that conversion because it's not a consistoire conversion. It's done by me and you, and we're not accepted by the Rabbanut. But what I tell everybody is, don't worry about that. Israel, as we all know, changes its policies 3 times an hour. So what's going to happen 25 years from now? Hopefully someone will bring the light to this situation over the course of 25 years. And of course, and this is to Myriam and Emil's credit and to everybody else who we work with, the fact that these people are amazing Jews and they're creating amazing Jewish families, it's what they like to call facts on the ground. That's not everything. Facts on the ground don't win every battle. As Mary will be happy to tell you, the fact that Maharat has graduated 100 Maharats doesn't mean that Maharat is accepted within the mainstream Orthodox community, not in America, not around the world. But when it comes to conversion, and I think we're going to come back, we're going to end where we started, and that is, there's an advantage. You see, this is not for this conversation, but whether or not women can be rabbis, the Orthodox community doesn't believe that they're better off with women rabbis. So it's easy for them to reject women rabbis because they think that they don't know Myriam, so they think men are more talented than women. But when it comes to converts, it's not true. Everybody wants more Jews. Whether they want to admit it or not, everybody wants more Jews. And every Orthodox rabbi wants more Orthodox families. So while they push back and there's a lot of politics and all this kind of stuff, but 20 years from now, if you have a married couple that Emil and Myriam married and they have 3, 4, 5 children, and they're an amazing Jewish family and the kids learn in yeshiva and they're all Orthodox, it's a different story when then they're going to go to get married. Now, I just told you a legend because I don't know what's going to happen 20 years from now. But at least in theory, we need to create to do the best we can creating those families. Is that, Mary, is what I said right?
Well,
kind of.
The problem is in France or with the Rabbanut, like, they waste nothing, and like there's nothing for them to lose by just telling them, okay, let's do Gira the Chumrah, where they can basically, if you need to abide by their rules if you want to be within their system. So when we have a person who's already 100% firm, has converted with Rabbi Mintz, and now wants some kind of acknowledgement by the Consistoire, and the Consistoire says, okay, here's what you need to do. You have 2 more years of another conversion. They basically have no other option than to do it. So I feel like there's that element of like, the Consistoire knows really well that that's like a sort of, it's also a piggy bank in a way. Like they
How
have
much money does the Consistoire make?
The thing is, like, so you have to pay, I mean, this would be equivalent of like 100 per hour, right? Or like a little bit less. But for France, it's like really high. So it's like completely different rates. So it's a high hourly rate, and you have to keep paying it like every single week. So the thing is like, technically they could just acknowledge your conversions and they would be like, it would be right if they did that, but they have the other option of just asking that person to just do a few more classes, and then it ends up being several years, and forcing that person, if you want our conversion, you'll have to show up in shul every single Shabbat for all 3 services, right? And like that, it's technically and like in a Machiavellian way, but it is in their best interest to do that, to just demand more, because people they have no other option. If they want to get married with the Consistoire, they will have to do everything the Consistoire asks them to do. If they want to get married with the Rabbanut, despite the fact that, I don't know, they could have a Tzohar conversion, they could have, like, there are options that are halachic and close to the Rabbanut, but the Rabbanut will ask for a Giur Lechumrah. I'm not saying that the Rabbanut is pushing it in the direction of like asking people for like 3-5-year conversions, right? The Rabbanut tends to be more, I guess, more sensitive to like time, right? And the question of like people not wanting to wait for like years and years and years. But the Consistoire has a complete monopoly over the destiny of these people. So they can basically ask for anything. And yes, it is true that it is not in their best like financial interest to just say, okay, Rabbi Mintz's conversions, yes, fine, we'll accept them. Like it brings in nothing.
I have a question. I have a final question, and that is, two things. One, what is the majority? Do you have any figures or an idea of how many people are converting in France every year? And what percentage of those people are having consistoire conversions? Because the other thing I'm thinking is this a uniquely European Catholic approach to conversion? And I mean Catholic with the small c, i.e. that, we are only 250 years old in the United States of America. And, we can see that in our architecture, we can see that in our political systems. Is this uniquely French/European, this kind of very conservative and almost, let's call it religiously xenophobic approach to conversion? Is it because of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of history that we don't have here, or is it something else? And what percentage, again, of people who convert every year do you think are the majority going to Consistoire, or are they spiritually entrepreneurial, as the two of you obviously are, and they're more open to joining a community like yours in France?
I would argue that something that I believe I would paraphrase what they've told me is like they would rather have less Jews who are more observant than have many, many Jews that they think are, I'm sorry, but like less qualitative in terms of like they will sometimes leave whole families on the lurch where it's like the dad is Jewish and there are kids and the dad is like showing up in shul, and like it would be so convenient to just convert the mom and the kids, but like sometimes they will just like leave the whole family like waiting because they're like, okay, no, we actually want people who like want to commit to be 100%. Like it's the like the Tariq is like the 613 mitzvot, and if you don't want to do that, then we don't want you. And I believe that that's kind of like it's been influenced by a more Haredi approach where it's like we don't want more Jews, we just want more people who are like truly observant. And there's a dimension of like I've seen a lot of like not necessarily rabbis but individuals having like a xenophobic approach to converts, as in like they're not really like us or like something like that I believe has also influenced that approach of like we don't want you guys. By the way, it's like we will keep you waiting, and if you're really motivated, and if you're like, I don't know, the elite of the converts, like you can stay. And if you wait for 3 years, if you wait for 5 years, then yes, well, eventually we're hoping that if you've done all of that, you will stay from till the day you die. So that's the whole point, I guess.
So thank you, Myriam. I mean, you raised some really interesting issues.
Mhm.
Some, like we said, are similar to America, some very different. I mean, the most problematic thing you bring up is, given the control of the Consistoire, the fact that they make conversion so difficult and they control so many life cycle events afterwards, you're putting these people in a very difficult position. I think we'll end by saying that, Myriam, the community that you and Emil have created in Ayeka is very much a unique community. And that is an Orthodox community that's outside of the Consistoire, is something that took a lot of courage to create. Now, at this point, you don't have the Orthodox clout to be a community on your own. So you don't have your own mohel, and you don't have your own school, and you don't have, I mean, I guess you do have your own bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah,
Yeah.
but you don't have some of the things, some of the life cycle apparatus that you need to create a community. So I think we end by saying, I don't know if we're going to solve the Consistoire, but I think we all know that that strengthening your community is definitely going to be a step in the right direction. So thank you so much, Myriam. Meredith, I told you this was going to be amazing.
My head's about to blow off.
I know, it's absolutely amazing.